Today I'm here to talk about my volunteer work, which is with the e-NABLE volunteer community. And so, let's see if my computer's going to work. There it is. Okay, so let's see if this video plays. This is just a quick example of what we do. Here we have a young girl that was one of our first recipients of these devices. You can see she has missing her fingers, puts on this 3D printed hand and strapped on some Velcro. And when she bends her wrist, you can see that the fingers operate, and the key part is the look on her face there. That's what we did. So it really puts a very unique kind of smile on his face. And so a little background of where this came from. There was a carpenter in South Africa, named Richard. He's on the right. And on the left, we have a guy named Ivan Owen who was into cosplay. You guys might know what that is. It's where you kind of make up costumes to dress up like video game characters or fantasy characters, things like that. He was really into that. And one of the things that he did was he made a sort of a costume hand, a big prop hand. I don't remember if I put that in here. I did. So he made this big prop hand, metal hand, these fingers that came out and could be operated with these strings, so that you could have these crazy puppet hands that come out of everything. And he did a video about it and put it up on YouTube. Well, this guy, Richard, saw that video. He had lost his fingers in a woodshop accident. And he said, so I see you make this mechanical hand. You think you could help make some fingers for me? So halfway across the world, these guys decided that they would collaborate on this. And I said, yeah, sure, I'll try to do something with you. And so they came up with it was not originally 3D printable like the one you see here. They first made it out of, materials like metal and bolts and stuff like that. But they then ended up with the help of a donation from MakerBot. They started to figure out how to 3D print these things. And so what you're seeing here is one of the first 3D printable designs. And so aside from the 3D printed parts that you see, all the plastic parts, you have some strings and some screws and stuff, but not much else. And so they put this together. And I've got some samples here that we'll go through and I'll show you. You can try them out afterwards. But the basic premise is that they're wrist operated. By bending the wrist, the lines being extended cause the fingers to bend. And when you extend the wrist, there are elastics that extend the fingers back to their original position. So it's nothing fancy. And that turns out that's kind of the reason these things have caught on. So they worked out some fingers for this carpenter. The reason you see the hand design here is because while they were doing all that, they were sharing this work online, and someone else in South Africa reached out to them. There was a child by the name of Liam who was missing all of his fingers, and his mom reached out and asked if they could do something. So they ended up working together and created this whole hand design for this kid Liam, and they got it to work. And so this was part of where they were sharing their work online. They shared this YouTube video. But when they got this design to work, they were thinking about the fact, well, Liam's going to have to grow this hand pretty quickly, and so that's why they thought about using 3D printing. Then they could just make another one each year a lot more easily. But the key is that when they finished this, they came up with this really cool design, something that nobody had done really before, 3D printing a prosthetic. After that, they made the key decision, I in particular, to not copyright this and try to make a bunch of money off of it. Instead, they released it as open source, shared it with the whole world, said anybody can use this, anybody can download it, anybody can modify it and make it better as long as you share it back. And that was really what started this whole thing. So they shared a video on YouTube, and you know how videos can go. It's not often that you find a YouTube video that has like nothing but positive comments on it, but this was one of those instances. And so along comes John Shull, a professor at the time with Rochester Institute of Technology out in New York, and he just decided to take some action. He said, hey, look, here's a Google map that I created. If you've got a 3D printer and you want to do this, then go ahead and put a pin on the map. And to his surprise, it really kind of started to take off, and a lot of pins started appearing on the map. This is about when I got involved, when there were only a couple of dozen people in the community. And so it's turned into this international community. Today we have over, let's see, I think we're coming up on 200 chapters in 53 countries, and that's not to count the thousands of volunteers that we have that are not associated with the chapter. You don't need to be. And you can see that sort of inflection point there. That was the point where I sort of got involved and started not only making these devices, but I met somebody in our community here, an adult man by the name of Jose Delgado, and I ended up sharing the project I did with him on our blog, and we shared a video on YouTube. This is a man who was, again, born without fingers. This is probably more common than you might think. I think it's something like 1 in 2,000, if I recall the statistics correctly, but there's a lot of kids born with this condition. It's called amniotic bandage syndrome. There's some others, but that's probably the most common one, where you're just, missing fingers, but otherwise you have a palm that's intact and you move your wrist. And so those are the kind of the ideal candidates for these types of hand devices. We'll talk later about the arm devices over there. So anyway, Jose was one of these guys who had been born without fingers. He got along fine, but he did have a prosthetic. He was one of the lucky ones that had insurance coverage, and so he had one of those prosthetics that were powered. It actually sort of has a sensor that reads your muscles. When you tense your muscle, it'll make it grip, and when you sort of relax your muscle, it opens it up. And so it sounds very fancy. He said that it cost $42,000 at the time that his insurance paid for it. But he found it heavy and awkward, and he said it caused a lot of false positives. So like when he's trying to drive, it would like open when he wouldn't want it to, and just not very convenient. He also happens to work as a box handler by profession. He's literally lifting boxes all day long. And so he wanted something that was just going to be a little bit more reliable. He saw something that I posted on my blog and reached out and said, "You make one for me," and I did. And it was kind of, I don't have one I made for him here, but it was kind of like this. He was a big guy. And his hands have always been made in black. That's what he's always liked, so he always asked me to make them in black. And so I made him one that looked a lot like this. This is a demo version so that people with fingers can try it out. So you strap something on your arm here, and basically, like I said, you turn the wrist. That's what it's about. So I made one of these for him, and he used it for a while. Came back after a few weeks of using it and sat down on camera with me and talked about how he actually really enjoyed it a lot more than his other prosthetics. So this thing that cost me, I don't know, $25 probably for all the materials to assemble it and everything, he liked better than his $42,000 prosthetic. And we had a discussion about that on video, which I shared, and to my surprise, it kind of went viral, and next day, Fox News reaches out to me, and they have me on an interview with me. So that's where you see things kind of start to go well. We got a lot of people that joined us because they started to learn about what we were doing. Things got really exciting. And so we also started a Google Plus community. This time, this was where people could just kind of collaborate online and share their stories and everything. So you probably know Google Plus is no more. So we have shifted that whole operation over to a new platform called the e-NABLE Hub that we might chat about later. But this is what I was talking about. This is the guy Jose there, and he's wearing his new hand that I made there, and that video is the one that kind of got everyone's attention. So got a Facebook page going, started to attract attention, website to share all these stories about the community and the work people were doing. And the next thing we know, there's just this amazing thing happening. It's been described as a Cambrian explosion of innovation, because we took that initial design, and actually the initial design you're seeing down there, you can't see it too clearly here, but that's not a 3D printed hand. That actually goes way back to a guy named Corporal Coles. I can't remember his first name. Back in the, I don't remember, 17 or 1800s, he made that using like whale bone and some other materials. But that's where the idea came from, of the mechanics of the hand. He was actually the one that came up with it. And then along comes that mechanical steel version that Ivan and Richard built, and the first 3D printed hand. And then boom, once that got released as open source, everyone started coming up with ideas for how to make this better. And so we have all these different designs that have come out. You can see how some of those have evolved here. This was actually one that I was on the design team for, so I helped design this called a Raptor hand. And it's obviously a sort of a non-anthropomorphic look. It's kind of, angular and blocky. We found a lot of kids really like these kinds of hands. We started making these superhero themed hands like this one here. This is an arm, of course. We got into arms later. So we started making these themed devices, and that got very popular. But the designs have really evolved very rapidly, and that's really the key here. The power of 3D printing combined with open source, combined with the internet, combined with a bunch of people with a lot of goodwill is a very powerful thing. Really powerful. And that's been exciting to watch over the years. And so this was the original, after the original, what was called the Robo Hand. They came up with a snap-together version that MakerBot released based on their design. And then along came a professor named Jorge Zuniga, who came up with what was called the cyborg beast. Very cool looking design. Kids love this in the US. That made it very popular. They love that cyborg kind of look. But as we grew as an organization, we started to learn that not everybody has the same needs. So other devices started to come along. Here's one called the Talon Hand, which was designed to be kind of more robust. Didn't care too much about looks. This is for an older teenager who's still part of our community, Peregrine Hoffman, and he actually operated. He works as a welder. You can see it's got a leather, what we call the cuff, the part that goes over the forearm. It's made out of leather, so it's very tough and robust, and it operates with something called a push-pull mechanism. So there's a single set of semi-stiff cords that moves the fingers in both directions. It just works a little bit differently, but it's still wrist operated. As the Talon Beast, which was kind of a combination of those two, it was a more open area that worked better for this particular individual. Wanted to get more airflow and that kind of thing. This was called the Odie Hand. This was made for a very young boy that, we found that it was actually too hard for him to operate the hand because of the resistance involved, and so they cut out a couple of fingers. You don't still do the same stuff with 2 fingers as well as 4, and so they put 2 fingers in a thumb, and now it doesn't require nearly as much, force to operate it. This is a young man who actually came up with his own design with his father. He said, I want a hand that has 2 thumbs because then I can hold my swords better and ride a bike more easily. So why not? Then make a hand on each side and work right. And the wonderful thing is everyone as they're coming up with these designs, again, they're all sharing them back to the world as open source. Anybody can build off of them. There's John Schull, the guy that helped get this going, and he was one of the first ones to come up with an arm design. That's the RIT arm there, which has now been sort of replaced with newer designs, but you can see them trying out that prototype. This was another sort of an off-sprout of the e-NABLE community, the guy that this article is talking about. I think this is, I know his name is Nero Turner, what his new company is called. It might be something about unlimited. But in any case, he came up with these powered designs that got a lot of media coverage. So he kind of spun that off in a commercial entity. He came through this e-NABLE community. And you can see some of these themed designs I was talking about. You start to see Iron Man hands and the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and people start getting really creative with the themes. Along comes another partner of ours. This is Dr. Chi over on the left. He's actually one of the world's leading experts in brain control prosthetics. Now, that's not something we're getting into, but it's something that he does. He's in the really advanced prosthetic stuff, but he was blown away by what we were doing. Not only did he really like it, but he really wanted to support it, and so he helped us to coordinate the first e-NABLE conference in partnership with Johns Hopkins. We did that back in 2014. It was a huge success. We brought together prosthetists, all medical professionals, occupational therapists, etc., along with families of people with limb differences. And we actually had workshops. We actually showed those families how to work together to sit and build one of these hands for themselves, and they got to put them together. We had separate workshops where the professionals learned how to do it and how they could incorporate this into what they're doing. It was really an exciting collaboration for what until then had been nothing but a bunch of us amateurs just doing this on our own. And we were then written up in O&D magazine, another it's a publication focused on occupational therapists and prosthetics, and just lots of good coverage. So continuing growth, and it's led to, like I said, a lot of new innovations. So I brought some of those samples with. So this was one of the ones that I was involved with earlier on, called the Raptor design, and so you can see those earlier designs and what they look like. Right now, probably one of our most popular designs is called the Phoenix hand, and this is an example of that. You can see that it's a little curvier. It's got to start getting a little bit shapelier, but the mechanics are the same. It's still operated based on that same principle. Now, another one that was recently developed, actually 2 more I'm going to show you, because this is something that we're working on now. So this one is a very cool design. This is called the kinetic hand. As you can see, this one looks really nice, right? This is based on the actual hand that they scanned and then used that as the base for the model. And so it really looks nicer than any of our other designs. and has the same operation, but you'll notice as you come up here and play with these, especially, that it's very quiet. Hardly hear it compared to when I was doing this one. It's a little different, right? Okay, so there's some reasons for that. This kinetic hand uses flexible materials, so you're printing with something called TPU, which is a flexible, almost like a rubbery material, and that's what these hinges are made out of, and that's what this covering is made out of. So as you can see, it's got like a flex to it. It's got a little give to it. There's a pad that's inside there that take up extra space. Well, that has nice features to it, but it's not the easiest thing to print. A lot of people are kind of intimidated by printing flexible materials. You have to kind of have your printer set up right for it, and you have to have all the settings right. It's just, some people just don't have the best luck with it.
Is it more expensive?
It can be, yes. It's gotten better because there's so many more options available now, so you can get it more affordably than it used to be, but it's still more than something like PLA. It's going to be a little bit more expensive.
Okay.
A little bit more. So then there's this other design. This is called the Osprey hand, and there was one in there that I showed you that Peregrine Hawthorne had helped design. He's the welder, and this was by the same pair. This is Peregrine and his father, which is his father's name is Peter. And so Peregrine and Peter came up. This was their next design. This is called the Osprey hand, and again, they built it to be really robust. This is the push-pull mechanism I was talking about. So this set of nylon cables in here is what operates this hand. There's no elastics in here, so when you bend it down, the elastics being contracted are pulling the fingers in, and when you bend it back up, those same elastics are pushing the fingers back out. So it's the same lines doing the pushing and the pulling. That's why we call it push-pull mechanism. The result is it's a little more robust, really strong in both directions. It's really strong here. So for somebody that's doing physical work and working on welding and needs to hold things securely, this was a good thing. Leather covering the palm, which kind of sort of conforms to you over time. Leather here. It's got some nice features. Again, not the nicest, most sort of natural looking hand. It's got a very kind of a square shape to it, but it's got nice mechanics. So over the last, I don't know, 6 months, I guess now, I've been leading a team of our volunteers. I don't know, 8 or 9 of us are working to design our next e-NABLE hand, which we'll be releasing not too long from now because we've made a lot of progress on it. What we decided to do basically is take the looks of this design and the mechanics of this design and merge them together and incorporate a bunch of other improvements. Number one, we don't want people to have to print these flexible materials. Well, we needed to be able to kind of conform in the way that this stuff does. How do we do that if we don't want people to print flexible materials? We need something that kind of adapts to your shape. You guys, have you seen the 3D printable chainmail that's out there? It's on 3DUniverse. There's a number of different kinds, but the idea is, and I'm sorry I didn't bring any with me today, but you know what chainmail is, like from medieval times, like what they would make for armor and stuff. It's just links of usually metal chain. It's just this chain, like a sheet of chain that you wear basically for protection. You can 3D print this because those chains, the way they're interlinked, and the way printing works, you can basically print them and such that they're interlinked as they print. It sounds harder than it is. It's actually a very easy thing to print. It's not a flexible material. We're printing it with whatever you have, PLA, tough PLA, whatever. So what we realized is we can actually use that. So we've come up with a design that's actually using, instead of these Velcro straps you're seeing here, it actually has chainmail that kind of wraps around your arm and links into the hand, and the same thing around the palm. We're actually using that 3D printable chainmail to achieve some of that conformity. We're eliminating these hinge joints here, so that the chainmail is actually what's going to connect what we call a cuff to the hand. It'll be connected right down here. And the reason we're doing that is so that you'll have this kind of lateral freedom. What that does is it means that these lines are run in such a way that we can do a variable grip. So when you turn your hand this way, we'll do that. When you turn your hand this way, we'll do that. So you can actually, so if you want to hold a cup, you can do that. You can actually get your fingers under something. So we'll be able to allow a little bit more control over the grip that way. So lots of cool kind of improvements, and it's coming along really nicely. I could show it to you if you're interested in just the model. I don't have the hand here, but I've got CAD software on it. And then of course we've got the arms. So I brought a couple of samples. We've got, so these are all the hands are wrist activated. They all operate basically the same way, except for a couple that are what I call terminal devices. So these would attach to a socket if somebody has professionally made. But then we get into arms, and arms are really in two categories. You've got something like this, which is an elbow actuated arm. So the idea here is that the person has something below their elbow. So maybe they have an amputation here or here, but they have to have something below the elbow because that's what actually is operating this. You know, just like the hand, when you operate the elbow, that's what causes the lines to move, that's what causes the fingers to move. But then we have people that have above elbow amputations, and all they have is the shoulder, or maybe a little bit below that. So we had people who came up with a shoulder actuated device. This actually goes into here, but it's hard to get in there, so I won't do it right now. And this is a, as you can see, kind of a harness, a shoulder harness that actually gets strapped around their chest, and then by sort of, it's almost like shrugging their shoulders that actuates the lines in this one and causes the hand to actuate. But that's actually a bit of an outdated design, but it was only the only sample. So anyway, lots of cool designs that people are coming up with. And here's the thing with the e-NABLE community. Everything that I've talked about, everything that's been done, everything that we are doing, everything that we will do is being done by ordinary folks just like you. These are just volunteers. No special qualifications. You don't need any special skills or training whatsoever. Anybody who wants to get involved can get involved. And there's lots to do. It's not just making these things. Some people, a lot of our volunteers are makers, but then we've got people that are more interested in maybe helping us to share the stories of the community. Some people might have, we've got people that are doing development work for us to help us with our websites and writing new applications to help make these devices better. And we've got people that help us with language translation because we're, of course, a global community now. There's all kinds of things people can do to help. So if it's of interest, check out at enablingthefuture.org. There's a lot more information there and links to get started and get involved. And I'm happy to help and answer any questions if there are any. Yes, let's start.
Well, things fell off of the.
Oh yeah, thank you. Yeah, that one is, like I said, a little bit outdated and falling apart. Thank you. So start with questions, then I'll invite you guys to kind of come up and check these out. Does anybody have any questions?
Are you guys working on prosthetics for like lower body?
Yeah, so that's a good question. There's a couple of other areas we're working on. Number one, yeah, we worked on lower limb prosthetics for a long while. We've shied away from it from a liability point of view because if somebody is wearing a 3D printed leg and it breaks, they can get hurt. And so we've been very careful about putting anything like that out there. But we do have volunteers that have done extremely impressive work with 3D printed feet that would attach to a more robust, metal sort of, leg like they're made traditionally. We have people that are working on entire lower limb prosthetics, but they're not entirely 3D printed. They're incorporating, a core that might be carbon fiber or something like that, and has to be connected with 3D printing components. Those liability considerations are different in different parts of the world. People here in the U.S. are probably a lot more sensitive to that. There's people in other parts of the country that are just like, I don't care about that. We have people here with no legs. Come on, they're going to get it done regardless. So there is work being done on that. The other area that there's a lot of work being done on now, and that was actually this year that we got this going, is animal prosthetics. So now we're doing things, dogs and cats, and we've done some large bird prosthetics, and I think there's an emu that we're going to work for, all kinds of interesting animal prosthetic needs.
What part of the animal do you put?
I can't remember if that one was a leg or what. I think it was a leg or a partial leg. I wasn't part of that one. There was another really large bird called a secretary bird that one of our volunteers in Germany did a leg for. They got a lot of press coverage. He did a phenomenal job on that. And it's not just, it's not even just prosthetics, but it's not just limb prosthetics. For example, I just saw one the other day that I thought was brilliant. It was for a dog where that dog was blind and had a hard time getting around. It's basically a 3D printed thing that they wear on their head. It's just like a loop like that, so that when they bounce into something, they can feel it. So they don't hit their nose when they're walking on. That's brilliant. It's so easy to make. So there's other things like that. There's aids for people that are hearing impaired, people that might be blind. There's all kinds of assistive tech that our volunteers have gotten into. Most of it has been in hands and arms so far.
It might not be something you guys are working on, but do you know much about, are they using 3D printed for internal organs and transplants and stuff like that?
Well, they will. I mean, they're not there yet. They are, you know, there's, where 3D printing is right now is it's definitely being used in internal medicine in terms of surgery and stuff, but most of that is like 3D printed titanium hip implants and things like that. You know, it's mostly things that are made out of some kind of a metal. The kind of printing that you're talking about, where you're actually doing bioprinting, you're actually printing cellular material.
Oh, no, that's.
Yeah, they're getting into that now. So there are companies today that can 3D print, for example, you know, kidney tissue or liver tissue, functional tissues that they can't print the whole organ yet, but they can print functional tissue such that they can test medicines on it and things like that. So there's very exciting work being done there. And they're not far from being able to 3D print a fully functional kidney. They're not probably more than 10 years off from being able to 3D print parts. You know, it's going in that direction. And by the time you guys are grown up, you know, if you ever need to have an organ replaced, there's a good chance we can 3D print. Pretty wild, but they're not there yet. Any other questions?
So do any of these work while actually having a hand? Or
Only the, like this demo hand that I brought, you know, just so that people can kind of understand it's maybe just this bar instead of the cover that would normally be here. So that's just so that somebody can slip it on and, you know, put their fingers through there so you can see how it works. But it's not the kind of thing anybody would use, you know. It's only for people with those little differences.
How do the fingers, like, particularly, how do you activate the fingers in ones that are for the arm?
Well, it's the same principle, except that it's coming from, so instead of bending at the wrist, which elongates those lines and causes the fingers to come in, you would be bending at the elbow, so that when you extend the elbow, that's what causes the fingers to come in. When you pull it back, it allows them to go out, which is, as you can imagine, not the most comfortable way of, you have to kind of train yourself on these things. It's a little bit of a different way of doing things, and so we're always looking at ways of making that better. Now, not all of them work that way. Some of them are just what are called voluntary open designs. Do I have any of these here? No. One that's like these, you don't open them. The fingers just stay where they are. The thumb is on a spring, and so they would literally just, you know, they can use that to just get around something. And it might seem not like much, but it's actually pretty functional. I mean, somebody can do a lot with this design. It's called the river hand. So that if you know, want to have anything, if you want to pick up the drug or something, and it works quite well. You don't need the other hand to do it. You know, the way that thumb is positioned, the way it comes out of the river, so you can put it around something. So there are designs like that. I mentioned voluntary open, so these are all voluntary closing designs. I mean, when you bend your wrist, you're just making it close, and then you bring it back to open. There are other designs that are called voluntary open, so they stay closed by default, and by bending the wrist, you open them. So depending on what you're looking to do with it, you know, there's a lot of different designs available. And the other thing is, you know, most of the time when we make a design for somebody, it usually doesn't work the first time. It usually doesn't fit, or it's not exactly what they wanted. And so it's an iterative thing. You have to try a second time. You learn a lot from that first attempt, and then you go and you scale it differently, or you make it a different material. Sometimes we have to customize the designs, we actually have to change the models to change the shape or something. So we have people that can do that for us. But it's a lot of fun.
So how long does it take to 3D print like these generic
Well, it depends on a lot of things. On average, for an average size hand device, like I don't know, something like this, you could print all of these pieces on average, I'd say about maybe 15, 18 hours, maybe printing somewhere in that neighborhood. It depends if you could do it in half of that time. You could do it in a lot longer. It depends on your print settings. I tend to stay conservative. I care more about good print quality. I don't care if it takes longer. So, I mean, you could print all these parts in probably 5 or 6 hours if you wanted to. So I usually just set up a print. I put all the parts on the build plate all at once and just let it go overnight. When I get up in the morning, Any other questions?
How many patients does your organization help?
Well, we don't know. That's the funny thing.
Oh yeah, I guess.
Because, yeah, we've got volunteers all over the world. Like I said, anybody can get involved. We don't even know who has gotten involved sometimes because they've gone with the pile. We've got people all over the place making these. Our best guess is, so my company, 3DUniverse, one of the things that we did early on is I realized, man, if we really want people to be able to make these and help people all over the world, these like raptor hands. Well, I've got a 3D printer, I've got my 3D printing filament, but I've got to get screws of a certain size. I've got to get these elastic cables. I've got to get this fishing line that we use, this 80-pound test fishing line. I've got to get this Velcro. I've got to get this medical grade foam padding that goes in here. Well, not only did it take me a long time to find all those supplies, but the amount that you can't just buy one piece of the foam padding, you have to buy a whole roll of it, same with the Velcro. You gotta buy a whole box of screws. So I ended up spending like $100 just to get the materials I needed for one hand. So I decided that we would produce assembly materials kits. And my wife and I have done this ourselves for the last 8 years. So we produce kits for currently it's the Phoenix hand. This one here. That's kind of the most popular design currently. So we make kits for that one. We still make kits for the Cyborg Beast, which I don't have here today. And we'll have kits for that new design I told you about. So far, I can tell you that we have shipped out, what was it? I think it's 11,000 of these kits so far. So, and not everyone uses our kits, right? I mean, we're only doing this here in the U.S. We ship all over the world, but the way shipping costs are, I know a lot of people in other places are making these without using their kits. So my best guess is over 10,000. Because a lot of the kits that we sell are, a lot of people make a device and then it's just on the shelf, they do it for themselves or something. So not all of those were made for people. But I would guess it's over 10,000 people who actually receive devices at this point. So yeah, it's pretty cool. It'll help a lot of people. It's not just how expensive prosthetics can be, it's also that, especially with kids, a lot of times insurance doesn't want to cover a prosthetic device because, as I mentioned earlier, they know they're going to outgrow it. And so kids, even in a very well-off country like ours, kids often cannot get any kind of help when it comes to prosthetics. And so now there's an option where none existed. That's what we like to say about these. You can see they're very basic devices in terms, you can just kind of imagine, well, what can you really do with something that just does that and that? Well, it's true. They're very limited, basic devices. But what we like to talk about is that they're definitely better than nothing. And that's what a lot of people have, unfortunately. So that's where we try to provide something a lot better than nothing. You guys are welcome to come up and check these out and try them and play with them. I'm sorry, these are some of them have been in box too long and they're falling apart, as you can see. You're welcome.